Girls, we're all in Whoville, and we need everyone to sing and greet Christmas.
Henry, I said. He ignored me and shouted.
On your feet. We've got to sing so the Grinch comes down from the mountain.
Crying, the twins stood up. So did Trey, who turned as pale as a ghost when his father fired the rifle toward the drapes and screamed,
Sing!
Chapter 36. The phone rang again. This time Fowler took it.
We're fine,
he yelled and hung up. Then he looked at his children, who'd stopped singing.
Again! Louder! It's got to be heard way up the mountain in the Grinch's cave.
Fowler was really getting into it now. He'd launched into a second chorus when I stood up and shouted, Counselor! The former civil defense attorney stopped and looked at me dumbly, while his children's terrified singing dwindled to sniffling.
What?
He said.
Don't like Dr. Seuss on Christmas morning, Cross?
I love Dr. Seuss on Christmas morning, or on any morning. It's just time for a little cross-examination. For a moment, there was indecision in Fowler's face. Then he set the rifle against the fireplace and said,
Sorry, trial's over.
Call this an appeal, then, I said.
No appeals,
he shouted, reaching into his pocket and feeding something into his mouth.
There are no appeals in this courtroom.
But judgments can be overturned, I said, moving toward him.
There will be no stays of execution.
I looked at him and said softly, Was it the Huntington's drug case? Or the vaccine for hepatitis A? Chapter 37. You never told her? I asked Fowler. Diana doesn't know about those two cases? I could see the rage in him building toward release, the rhino about to run. He put the tip of his shotgun right under my chin.
What don't I know?
Diana cried.
Henry?
Fowler winced at her voice and then stepped away from me to point the weapon at her.
Shut up, Diana.
No! I will not shut up! And if my husband is going to die, and my children, I think I deserve to know why.
It was the lawsuits, Henry, I said. Wasn't it? Fowler said nothing, just stared at his wife as if she were a black hole he would never really fathom.
What about them? Henry, what about the lawsuits?
Fowler just stood there, a man unhinged, chewing on the source of his own destruction, unable or unwilling to describe its bitterness. I said, In one or maybe both of those lawsuits, I believe your husband came into possession of evidence that might have changed the verdicts.
What?
Diana said, frowning, still looking at her ex-husband.
Is that true? What kind of evidence, Henry?
He wouldn't look at her. Data, medical records, who knows, I said. But Henry knew something, and he never revealed the evidence to the people suing the companies he represented. He violated ethics. He broke laws. He destroyed lives. But in the process, he became a very, very wealthy man. And that was good. So he tried to compartmentalize, to bury what he'd done. But the problem is that deep down your ex-husband is a good man, a man of conscience, and it began to eat at him. So he started using liquor and drugs to calm the guilt, and it all went to hell and self-loathing. Is that about right, Henry? Chapter 38. The anger boiled again in Fowler, setting off a twitch and a tick that seemed to ripple through his entire body.
You're off by 20 or 30 degrees, Cross.
Put us straight, then. He shot Diana a venomous look.
Don't think you're not responsible. Don't think you won't be held accountable for what you've done.
Henry, I said, tell us the truth.
I won the first suit fair and square. But afterward, a year after we won the suit involving the Huntington's drug, I came across data that I had never seen before, and case files that had never made their way into the proceedings. There was sufficient evidence that the drug accelerated their mortality.
But you never told anyone?
And tarnish my stellar reputation? Ruin the family fun? Decrease the speed with which my bitch of a wife was spending the fortune they were paying me? $2 million that year. $2 million.
He looked at Diana like he wanted to throttle her.
Every single day I'd come home and hear the gargantuan list of crap she'd bought from this shop or that, or from a catalog or off the web, or I'd hear about the cabinet makers she'd had in, or the granite countertop guy, on and on and on.
Fowler glared at me.
I was trapped.
But it got worse when you began to represent the hepatitis A vaccine manufacturer? He set his jaw and nodded.
That case was almost like you described it, Cross. We were well into trial, and I get this report from an investigator I'd hired to find people who'd taken the hepatitis A vaccine, but who weren't part of the class action suit.
And?
It showed an anomaly among teenagers who'd had the vaccine.
He replied,
They seemed to have suffered mild but permanent brain damage because of it.
Diana gasped.
And you didn't tell anybody?
And lose? I couldn't lose. You wouldn't let me lose. The kids wouldn't let me. The firm wouldn't let me. And then you start screwing Barry, and the whole thing went to...
He flipped off the shotgun's safety.
Happy now, Cross? Ready to see the ultimate repercussions of my shredding that private investigator's report?
Chapter 39. What do you think killing everyone in this room is going to do for you, Henry? I asked, glancing at a clock on the mantelpiece and seeing that it was 7:15. Erase what you've done?
Among other things.
I gestured at the phone on the floor. They've been listening. He swung the shotgun at me now.
I really don't like you, Cross.
You can make it right, Henry, I said.
I'm going to hell for what I've done. I've made my peace with that.
My grandmother's in her 90s, and she likes to say that every Christmas is a time for rebirth, I said. I can tell you how you can do that, if you'll let me. His meth eyes hopped all over me.
You trying to sell me some 12-step program?
I made a show of looking at Diana and Dr. Nicholson and the children, and then said, I think you'll want to hear this alone, Henry. You can decide later whether to tell them. We'll go somewhere, the kitchen, have a cup of coffee. I'll tell you what I think.
How stupid do you think I am? Yeah, we'll go and talk, and then these bastards will take off.
Don't be crazy, Henry. I would never leave Barry.
Sadness, mixed with loss, flickered across his face. Fowler looked at me, reached into his pocket, fed himself something again. You taking a visit to the Oxycontinent? I asked.
So what if I am?
Let's go talk, I said, thinking that it was good he was taking a narcotic. Fowler blinked, then gestured toward the center hall.
My den.
I didn't want Fowler in the den, which was on the opposite side of the house. I wanted him in the kitchen, which was at the rear and overlooked a walled-in garden. I could really use some coffee. The narcotic was hitting Fowler, taking the edge off his high anxiety.
Sure. We aim to please,
he said. Then he cracked up and poked me forward with the gun. We walked to the living room entranceway. Fowler stopped there and spun around. He held his shotgun in the air. For a moment, I thought he might fire at the ceiling again. Instead, he spoke to his family with quiet contempt.
I swear to God, if any one of you moves, I will paint the walls with your blood.
Chapter 40. Which way? I asked, knowing full well where the kitchen was from blueprints New had shown me, but wanting to seem ignorant and let Fowler think he remained in control.
Right.
I pivoted and walked down the narrow hallway lined with framed family pictures, my mind whirling with all the ways this move could go bad. What if Diana defied Fowler and tried to get her kids out? What if she tried to run? We passed the formal dining room on our right. The table was decorated and set like Martha Stewart was coming over for Christmas dinner. I could see the kitchen entry straight ahead, a light, airy space with lots of windows that looked out at the now leafless ancient oak trees that graced the backyard. I stepped into the kitchen. Fowler stopped short in the hallway and said,
I took that photo. I used to call it the most beautiful picture in the world.
I wanted Fowler to come into the kitchen, but he was transfixed, and I had to see why. The moment I saw the picture, I sensed another dimension to Fowler's madness. One picture, it seemed, was worth 1,000 rants. In the photo, a younger version of Fowler's family sat on the deck of a house that looked to be somewhere on the New England shore, or maybe in Jersey. 5 years ago it must have been, because Trey was a baby in Diana's lap.
See how perfect they all look, Cross? How blonde they are? It's like a catalog. Brooks Brothers. Ralph Lauren. You know where that is? That's Martha's Vineyard, Oak Bluffs. See that house? That house cost me $60,000 to rent for the month of August. Some people don't make $60,000 in a year, and that's what I was spending on a damn rental in Martha's Vineyard. Those were the days, man. Those were the days, my friend.
Chapter 41. I focused on the photograph that Henry Fowler had taken. His family sat smiling naturally in front of a great big weather-beaten house. All 3 children, even the baby, were wearing charcoal blue sweaters. And Fowler was right. They looked good. They were tan. Diana's hair was shorter. The kids in the light and Diana really did look beautiful. And everyone looked happy, facing the man who was taking the picture, Henry Fowler. I glanced at him and saw that the pain medicine was swirling in him, putting him in another place and time. I thought about trying to knock the gun from his hands, but he kept it out of reach. I'd pushed him, gotten him to reveal his demons, but I remained unsure if I could get him to give up. I glanced at the clock above the stove. 7:25 a.m. Dr. Nicholson had been shot hours ago. He had to get medical attention, which meant I needed Fowler in the kitchen. Now.
God, what a summer.
Fowler said in a whisper, still staring at the photo.
We loved it there, all of us. We had an ocean view and a sailboat. 2 college kids crewed for us. Every day we ate lobster and fries and clams and blueberry pie. I burned money. Thought it would never end.
Tears dripped down his cheeks.
I was the luckiest guy in the whole world. With the best family, the perfect family.
His voice turned bitter again, and he gripped his gun as if he meant to club someone with it. I took a step into the kitchen, hoping he'd follow. But Fowler just stood there, looking at the picture.
And then I blew it, Cross. I blew the perfect life.
A small red dot appeared on his left hip, wavered, then began to travel up his body toward his chest. The sniper New and I had ordered into one of the oak trees in the backyard had finally found Fowler through the window. Chapter 42. We'd decided, before I re-entered the house on 30th Street, that we couldn't afford to let Dr. Nicholson stay there much past 7:30. Not if we wanted to have a chance at saving him. If I didn't get Fowler to surrender, It was my job to lure him into the kitchen